Hello, I'm composer and sound artist Dr. Nathan Noakes. In this video, I would like to walk you through the basic usage of one of the electronic music studios at the Peck School of the Arts at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. This studio is part of the Composition and Technology program here. This room, 40A, or as I like to call it, the Synth Room, is designed for students to be able to experiment with synthesizers, electronic music, and otherwise work on basic recording projects. I'll be walking you through a basic layout as well as giving two examples of how to use the space. These examples are by no means the only thing you can do in here, but they should serve as a good guide for getting you started. Over here, we have our mixer, which is connected directly to the speakers. Behind me, we have the wall of synthesizers. On this side, we have our patch bay and audio interface, which is connected directly to the computer for recording. The computer is also connected to this MIDI controller, which is in turn connected to a bunch of these synthesizers behind me. It can be used to sequence some analog synthesizers directly with the computer. In scenario one, we'll be doing a basic recording into the computer by using the patch bay, one of the synthesizers, and using the mixer to monitor the sound. In scenario two, we'll be running audio from the computer into one of the synthesizers, processing it, and then sending it back into the computer for recording. In this example, we will be recording the Moog grandmother, which is being externally sequenced. Over here on the mixer, we have labeled outs. Any sound that we're going to hear in this space, in the speakers, first has to go through the mixer. Right here we can see grandmother, and I can turn it on. And it's important to remember that any audio coming from the computer also has to go through the mixer before you hear it. Here we have the Moog grandmother, which I can alter knobs and change effects, and we have the external sequencer that's running it, which I can start and stop. Over here we have our audio interface, which hooks directly up to the computer and allows for multiple channels to be recorded simultaneously, as well as multiple channels of playback. Below it we have a patch bay that we use for routing, and then we have an additional patch bay that has another specific function we'll talk about later. The patch bay is one of the most important parts of the studio. It allows us to affect the routing of a signal. Patch bays are generally set up in one of two ways. Normalized, which takes any incoming signal and routes it to an output location, and denormalized, which means that every single connection has to be made by plugging jacks into the front. Behind the patch bay, there's a bunch of in jacks and there's a bunch of out jacks. This one is set up in a normal configuration. Labeled here, we have the names of various synthesizers that are plugged in, including the grandmother that we are planning to record. We have a Mo2in, which is the name of our audio interface. We have 8 channels of recording here, and we have 8 channels out of Mo2 here. Because this patch bay is normalized, the sounds that the grandmother is producing are going straight into this and then straight out into the mixer. If we want to record the grandmother, what we'll need to do is take a patch cable and route it into the audio interface. First of all, we find where it says grandmother, in this case it's labeled GM, and it's marked out. The top level of this patch bay is set up to be what's called multi, which means if I plug in anything in the top level, it still allows the normalized connection to go to the mixer. However, if you plug anything into the bottom level, it'll send whatever's plugged in directly to the mixer and break the signal chain. We want to record the grandmother, so I'm going to take this and choose one of the 8 inputs for the Mo2. In this case, I'll choose channel 3. After plugging this in, you can see that there is a signal showing up on the audio interface. Currently, we're not hearing it because I turned the volume down on the mixer, but if I turn the volume up, it'd be playing through the speakers. Over here in my DAW, I'm going to make sure that the track is mono, and I'm going to change the input to channel 3. Once I arm the track, you might hear audio playback from the synthesizer depending on your settings. If you don't want to hear this, you can always mute the track and use the mixer directly to hear the sound while you're monitoring the recording. And then now we hit record. And as you can see here, the waveform from what we're recording is now showing up on the screen. In this other scenario, I'm going to take audio from the computer, which I'm going to choose channel 1 from the Motu, and I'm going to run it out into this second patch bay. The second patch bay has two functions. One is it is an output from the ARP synth that we have. Two, this section over here is connected directly to what's called a trunk, which more or less is just an extension cord that allows us to plug in from one side without having to string cables across the whole room. I've chosen channel 8, which will run straight into the trunk. I'm also going to run a line from the trunk from channel 7 to the Motu in. This time I'm going to choose channel 5. On the top of the ARP, we have the trunk, which, like I said earlier, just really acts as an extension cord from one side of the room to the other. Currently, we have channel 8, which is receiving audio from our patch bay, and we have channel 7, which will be sending audio into our audio interface from the patch bay. In the DAW, we're going to now start recording on channel 5 and continue to play the audio straight into the synthesizer so that we can mess with it. At our synthesizer, we have a line coming in from the trunk as well as a line going out into the trunk as before. We can now use the synthesizer to alter the sound that we had recorded previously through various effects and processes. Hopefully this video gives you an idea of some of the creative outlets, utility, experimentation, and fun you can actually have in this space. Enjoy.